needs a great deal of introduction because of the fantastic work that he's been doing in the last, well, what, about 4 years, 5 years now, Richard?
Just over 4 years, yeah.
Just over 4 years. And he has a regular TV show on, it's moved now, it's not Channel 201, is it?
191.
On Channel 191. People can keep up with the ongoing research for that. That comes out on Richard's show, which covers a wider and wider range of topics. And I'd like to thank him for coming to speak here today. And I know you will also thank him. He's going to ask you what he wants you to speak about in a minute. But I'll shut up now and I'll get you to welcome Richard D. Hall in the traditional way. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Andrew. Okay. Can everyone hear me first? Is that audio level all right? Yeah, great. Okay, yeah, as Andrew said, I've actually got 3 presentations prepared and I'm going to do 2. So I'm going to give you a choice of the first one. The first one covers the title here, The Media, Mind Control and Raoul Moat. And this is about, I'll cover a little bit on 7/7 and the media, and I'll go into various Manchurian candidates, people who have killed lots of people who I think have actually been mind controlled. The second talk covers the work of Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, the forensic historians, and that is an update on the shows that I did earlier this year about these 2 historians who have uncovered the grave of King Arthur, which the academic establishment will not look at, and I basically give you an update on that. So I'm happy to do this presentation or the other one. Has anyone got a preference? Blackett.
Media, mind control,
Right, hands up for this talk. Hands up for Wilson and Blackett. Okay, this one it is then. Sorry. All right. Okay. My background is in engineering. I did an electrical engineering degree. I graduated in 1990, so I believe I have an objective approach to all of these subjects. And when I turned 40, somehow I got involved in television. I don't quite know how, but I'm very glad that that happened. And the thing about my TV show, it is entirely independent. I do all the research, I do the filming, I do the audio, I do the presentation, and that cannot be said for any of the TV shows on television, including the alternative media TV shows. I can guarantee you that the TV channel that broadcasts my show has not influenced me one iota about the material I've been putting out. So it is 100% independent. And that is a picture of me at Newcastle University, believe it or not. As my mother used to say, fiddling with wires. Richard's fiddling with wires again. She once said to me, Richard, is it really necessary to have a car battery in your bedroom? I said, yeah. Doesn't everyone? Okay, now my sources, I don't have any secret MI5 sources or anything like that. They come from publicly available sources, the internet, people who give me information at events such as this, and also people who email me after my TV shows go out, and I have had some very good information from talks like this. Now, a couple of important facts that I have covered on my TV show first. Over the last few years I've been covering, with the help of Andrew Johnson, the work of Dr. Judy Wood, and Andrew went into a little bit of detail on her book. Now this book is the only comprehensive scientific investigation into the evidence of 9/11 by a qualified scientist, someone who could not be better qualified to examine and put over that evidence. And this book concludes beyond any reasonable doubt that the towers were destroyed using a directed energy weapon. That is now an established fact. It is not a theory. It is a fact, which has been proven, as I say, by a qualified scientist. Now, once you accept that as fact, and I recommend everyone read the book or watch the interviews, you come to the realization that that type of technology would not be in the hands of men with beards sitting in caves in Afghanistan. So it's blatant to me that the Al-Qaeda story is just a myth. Why would somebody do that? The reason given is that these are false flag events. They're staged events which allow those administrations to justify their wish to take over certain parts of the world. That's currently it's the Middle East, and I'm sure it will extend to the Far East at some point in time, because those who are behind these events, I have no doubt, are trying to bring about a one world government. Now, unfortunately, the same is true of the London bombings, 7/7, 2005, and I recommend everyone read this book. In my opinion, this book gets closest to the truth behind the veil of 7/7 by Dr. Nick Kolostrom. And again, this book proves that the 4 men accused of carrying out the London bombings were completely innocent patsies. Now, what can we do about this? Because I often say, I don't have an answer to this. I'm just trying to put out as much information as I can. Yesterday, I launched a campaign. If you go on my website, you can see details of it. And every single person in this room, every one of you, can help with this campaign. Because some people say to me, what can I do, Richard? What can I do to help? And I'm answering that question to every single one of you today. This is what you can do to help. Just watch this. This is a video that I'm going to put out on my show, and every one of you can help with this. It's called Tell Your MP About 7/7, and I'm just going to show a video which explains it. Okay, it's Saturday the 1st of September 2012, it's 9 AM in the morning, and I've come to Birdley. Now the reason why I've come here is because I'm going to hand over some very important information to my MP, Dave Anderson. Dave Anderson is a Labour MP, and I've got some basically documentation regarding the London bombings of 2005. Viewers will know that I've extensively covered the London bombings on the TV show over the last couple of years, featuring Nick Kolostrom, Anthony John Hill, and also intelligence analyst Tony Farrell. And I'm going to be handing over to Dave today, firstly, the book Terror on the Tube, written by Dr. Nick Kolostrom, Behind the Veil of 7/7, a copy of this document, which was written by Dr. Rory Ridley Duff of Sheffield Hallam University, that looks at the events at Canary Wharf on the day of 7/7. This document, written by ex-police principal intelligence analyst Tony Farrell. This letter written by Dr. Nick Kolostrom to Justice Lady Hallett, who sat at the inquest. Also going to give him a copy of the film 7/7 Ripple Effect, which seeks to expose the truth about the London bombings, and also 6 interviews that I've conducted with Nick Kolostrom, Anthony John Hill, and also Tony Farrell. And with all of this information is a covering letter in which I state that the overwhelming body of evidence proves beyond reasonable doubt that the 4 young Muslims who have been blamed by mainstream media for carrying out the bombings are totally innocent. The mainstream media have grossly misreported the facts about 7/7 and are at best ill-informed and at worst complicit in the bombings. There is not one shred of evidence that would convict any of these young men, which is why under the law they are still totally innocent of any charge. So download the covering letter and documents from richplanet.net, then print them out, book an appointment to see your MP, email me when you have handed the documents to the MP, and if you get a responding letter from your MP, scan it in and email it to me, and I'll put it on the website. Now I've got all 600 and odd MPs listed on my website, and the intention is, as I say, you can go to my website, click on the 7/7 campaign. There's a zip file. You download that. There's 6 documents in there, 43 pages in total. Print them out, sign it, and just book an appointment to see your MP and hand that evidence over.
Have you had a follow-up from your MP?
I haven't had a follow-up yet, but when I went to see him, he actually said to me, "This wouldn't surprise me." There's a full report on my meeting with my MP, and I said to him, now that I've given you this information, when the truth does come out and those who actually perpetrated this crime are brought to justice, all of the MPs in Parliament, I know what they will say. We didn't know about this. Now you can't say that, Dave Anderson, because I've given you the information. And if we can do that with every single MP, that's going to turn the screw and put some pressure on them, because they need the information. Because one other thing that he said to me, he said that he was completely unaware that there was an alternative theory to the government narrative. He wasn't even aware. So he's completely unaware of the alternative media, which I thought was worthy of note. But one thing he did acknowledge is that the government has very little oversight of the intelligence agencies. Because he was involved in the miners' strike, he was a Labour MP. Now if we look at this image here, no, that's not Raoul Moat on the left there. The guy on his knees very much represents the human race, and David Icke recently wrote a book called Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. And I agree with David Icke, the human race does need to get off its knees. But the problem is the human race is in a headlock. But they're in a headlock that most cannot describe or see. Described by someone called Zbigniew Brzezinski as the technotronic control grid, which is a range of measures that a global elite use to keep people in this headlock. And I would actually add to that picture a hand coming through the guy's legs and grabbing him by the balls. Okay, now let's just represent this technotronic control grid by this hand above the earth. There are a number of strands or pillars of control, and I've just listed some of them, and I'm going to drill down into a few of them today. I describe them as money, the control of money, mind, and I'm going to come on to mind control, the media, the military, and mouth. By mouth, I mean obviously anything that you eat, drink. There's huge concern over fluoride in water. That is dumbing people down, according to experts. Aspartame in drinks, and of course the pharmaceutical industry. The fundamental problem with the pharmaceutical industry is it is not in their interests to cure people. It's not in their interest to cure people, because if they cure them, they don't need any of their drugs, therefore they don't make any money. It's actually in their interests to keep people ill, and that's something which needs to be addressed. Financially rewarding them for selling more and more pills needs to be changed completely. Now, if we're in this technotronic control grid, then why don't our democratically elected leaders do something about it? Because they're supposedly the ones in charge. Well, of course, they're controlled by the technotronic control grid, and our leaders are chosen by these people who control this. And that includes our MPs. I actually call MPs prostitutes in suits. Not because they have sold their bodies, but because they have sold their minds. Why have they sold their minds? They have sold their minds because not one of them speaks the truth. Not one of them will talk about either of these events, the truth of either of these events. Not one MP. So they do not speak the truth, which is why I call them prostitutes in suits. At best, they are agony ants to their constituents. People go and whinge about their problems, and then they go back to Parliament and do nothing about it. And I would actually say that members of Parliament are not politicians. What a crazy statement. Well, what is politics and what are politicians? Politics is the discussion or debate of subjects that will bring about real changes to people's lives. That's what politics is, and I would argue that most politicians have no power to be able to bring about change. And I'm just going to illustrate this with this analogy. Just imagine that our political landscape is being discussed in this huge football stadium, and the players on the pitch are the political players in politics. What are the real issues which have brought about change in our world that the politicians should be aware of and should be discussing? Well, the first is the central banking system, and I'm going to touch very briefly on money. Our politicians really have no say in how currency is generated and entered into the economy. So they have no control over that issue. They have no control over the media. In fact, they are victims of media manipulation because they believe the bogus stories put out about 9/11 and 7/7. So they are victims of media manipulation. They're not in control of that. So they're outside of that power. False flag operations, again described in those two books, they would not even acknowledge that false flag operations have occurred. But what have false flag operations brought about in the world? Massive change. They've brought about military invasion of several countries and regime change. Millions of people have been killed as a result of false flag operations. That's real change in the world. That's real power politics. Do our politicians have any input into those decisions? None. They do not have the power. And they do not know about the hidden technology that Andrew Johnson spoke about either. Not just energy weapons, there is other hidden technology which our powerless politicians have no knowledge of. Commodities such as oil, coal, food and water are all controlled by corporations, and in those corporations the tail wags the dog. The politicians are just subservient to them. Health policies are determined by the World Health Organization and dictated to our government. Now, if you notice in my picture here, there's a little football pitch down here, a little five-a-side pitch with some kids playing jumpers for goalposts. That represents our parliament. That's the politics being played out on that pitch. Because what are the sort of issues that they discuss in our parliament? Things like, should we have 17.5% or 20% VAT? Or how about, should we increase health budget by 1% or decrease education by 2%? Does it matter? Are they really making big decisions? And a great one that they love to spend all their time over is fake scandals. Whenever you see anything on the news which has the word scandal after it, remove the word scandal and replace it with PSYOP, psychological operation, because we've had the phone hacking. It's not a scandal, and I'll explain why. It's a psychological operation. But the MPs fall for the scandal and get all wrapped up in it. And we've had this interest rate fixing scandal and numerous other scandals that they get wrapped up in. It's small fry. It's small beer. It's not anywhere near as important as the political power in these issues that our MPs have no control over. And somebody said to me recently, "Hey Richard, why don't you become an MP? You'd be great." I said, "What, and play on this shitty little football field outside the main ground?" I'm in the main stadium at the moment, right, but I'm not on the pitch. I'm not making any decisions. I have no influence over it, but at least I'm watching the match. Our MPs aren't even aware of the match. Now, because this power is pretend power, it's not real power, they have to convince people of this. They have to sell this fake power, and they spend a lot of effort doing that. It's guys like this, Nick Robinson or whatever he's called. They try and sex up the this politician, Labour said that, Conservative said that. It's complete trash. If only he'd been in my class at school. Right. Okay, let's drill down into some of these areas then. I mentioned money. I'm just going to keep it as short as I can on money because there's so much bullshit spoken about it. And I'm going to do it again with another analogy. Let's just imagine that the main financial centres of the economy are football teams. So you've got the banking system is one football team, the government is another, private industry is another, maybe the health service is another, private individuals is another. And they're all playing in this league trying to get your cut, okay? The current system, the bankers' home ground is on an angle of about 30 degrees like that, and they're always allowed to kick down. Not only that, their goal is about a quarter of the size of everyone else's, right? Which is why they always win the league and why they always get the prize money and why they're wealthier than everyone else. Now, what is the solution to that problem? Is it to say, ooh, these bankers team, I don't like that. Let's stop the players' bonuses. Let's give them lower bonuses. That'll sort it. Would that sort the problem? Because that's what they say about the banking system in the media. They say, we need to stop these bankers' bonuses. That'll sort them out. Would that sort the problem? Because the club would still be getting all of the spoils and winning the games. What is the solution to the problem? Well, it's to level the pitch first and make the goal the right size as well. But the problem is most people can't define or don't know how to make that pitch level. And I'm going to explain to you 3 things that would make that pitch level. If you did these 3 things, it would make that pitch level. The first, a sovereign government which has sovereign currency can't possibly be in debt, right? If it's in debt to an outside entity, then it is not the government. The outside entity loaning it the money is the government. It's like the bank running out of money in Monopoly. That never happens. Just as the government can never run out of money, that's impossible. It's a con, because the interest being paid by you and I through the government to the outside party is a phenomenal amount of money, and that does not need to exist. The government should have the right to create currency. It can't possibly be in debt. That's the first thing that needs to change. The second thing, when money is introduced into the economy, it's done through a system of fractional reserve banking, whereby money is loaned from the Bank of England into the commercial banks and then is loaned out to individuals and businesses. But that money, when it's reinvested back in the bank, is loaned out again and again and again. And that means that the banking system gets interest several times on the same piece of money. That's another con, and the overall effect of fractional reserve system is that wealth over time, 10, 20 years, is transferred from the common man and business into the hands of the bankers. So fractional reserve banking needs to be outlawed and ended. So if you put your pound in the bank, it stays in the bank. It doesn't get reloaned. If you need a loan, you would get it centrally from the government, interest-free. The third thing that needs to happen, and I've just mentioned it in that last sentence, is that usury needs to be made illegal. All charging of all interest, end of all credit cards, all interest needs to be made illegal, as it says in the Bible and in the Quran. Okay? Because you're making money, all interest is effectively slavery. All right? How would you get a loan? You'd get it centrally from a central bank and then pay it back with no interest. If you did that, you can easily eliminate inflation. There would be no inflation because the government could control the amount of money in the economy. And the pound in your pocket today would be worth the same as what it is, it would be worth the same in 40 years' time. So there would then even be no need to put your money in a bank because it wouldn't be threatened by inflation. Those 3 things would achieve that. Now, you will never ever hear any of those 3 things discussed on television, because the people who run the banks also control the television. There endeth the lesson on money. Okay, I mentioned pharmaceuticals, etc. Now, in the military, just briefly to touch on the military, they've been using these unmanned drones to expand their empires into other nations, in particular Pakistan. Why is the US bombing thousands of innocent civilians in Pakistan? And there doesn't seem to be any outrage of this. And these craft are flown thousands of miles away by US Air Force personnel in bases, sitting drinking hot cups of coffee. They go and have their lunch, they come back, and then they kill another village. And they're trying to get these drones put in our skies. They're trying to pass legislation to have unmanned drones flying around the UK and the US, and the excuse that they're using is we need them to have CCTV security to monitor the crime or what have you, when they could easily be retrofitted with missiles. The prostitutes in the suits will vote for them. The other thing that the military have at their disposal is secret technology, secret military technology, which Andrew spoke about. Okay, let's talk about the media then. Neil Sanders spoke about this quite a bit. Now, there are various methods, techniques that the media use to propagate their lies, and one of them I've termed it the phony bone of contention, and I spoke about this last year. What this is when they put a story in the media where there's contention, so there's an argument over something, and the subtext of the contention contains a flawed assumption, right? And I'll explain what I mean by this. Here's an example of one. So this is the headline of the Daily Mail. This was not long ago. Betrayal of a 7/7 bomb victim. Born to British parents, married to a British wife. A symbol of British courage. So why is he now facing deportation? So this is some guy And inside that cover there's a picture of him with a bandage on his head and blood on his face. He was a victim of the bombings in London. So they're creating an argument because the government are trying to deport him for whatever reason. I don't know what the reason is. But they're trying to get the reader emotionally involved in his case. Isn't it terrible that we are deporting him? Now what's the subtext to that story? The subtext to that story is 7/7 was done by Muslims. And you really can only get emotionally involved in that story if you accept that subtext. So they're reinforcing their flawed position on the bombings with a phony bone of contention. And there was another great example the other day with the Queen and Abu Hamza. Anyone see that one? Ooh, the Queen said Abu Hamza is dangerous for Britain. Really? Did the Queen really say that? Did someone know? And there was this contention over A, whether she should have said it, and B, whether it should have been reported. It's a phony bone of contention because once you enter that debate and the argument over whether the Queen should have said that, you're automatically accepting that he's a dangerous Al-Qaeda person. This is the person who was chums with Rashid Aswat. Rashid Aswat, the MI6 agent. Wouldn't surprise me if Abu Hamza is an MI5 or an MI6 agent. But they're trying to get you to accept that they're not and that they're Al-Qaeda by creating phony bones of contention. There was another one as well the other day. I'm trying to think what it was. Oh yeah, suicide bombers. Whenever there's a suicide bomber reported, I always think, well, show me the leg and I'll believe it was a suicide bomber. Or show me at least part of the body. Or the upset mother. They never do that. And this bone of contention, I think it was a UN compound or something that had been some suicide bomber. They were arguing over, someone said, oh, he was just a teenager. He was really young. And then someone else had said, no, he was 28 or something. So they're then arguing over the age of the suicide bomber, which means when you hear that argument, you automatically accept the initial lie. And the media is full of these phony bones of contention. So just keep your eye out for them. I think in that headline there's possibly a subliminal in there that Neil Sanders was talking about subliminals, and I'll show you it there. Bomb victim Kate. So this is a completely separate story. And the words bomb victim are lining up with Kate Middleton. Now I don't know what's in that. There's been quite a few like this with Harry, bomb, massacre, with Harry, and I don't know what's going on there. Maybe Neil Sanders can tell you more about that. Okay. The media hit piece. This is where someone might say something, for example, they might talk about 9/11, or they might talk about something which is damaging to the agenda, so they've got to do a hit piece on that person, and they've got to ridicule that person, make them look like an idiot. So I've chosen, I thought, well, who's the nicest person in Britain? Would anyone care to say who they think the nicest person in Britain is? You were looking at the screen. Okay, yeah, so I chose Bobby Charlton, right? Bobby Charlton, you know, who doesn't like Bobby Charlton? So I thought, well, I'll try and do a hit piece on Bobby Charlton, as they do hit pieces on David Icke and people like that. But so it was actually extremely easy, just to demonstrate that I could pick out anyone in this audience, just speak to your mates and write a hit piece on you. You could do it with anyone. Anyone could be made to look like a complete fool and kook if they write a hit piece on you. So here's the Bobby Charlton hit piece. Now, most of the information in this is actually factually true, but this is just for the purposes of this talk. I don't want to get sued by Bobby Charlton. Okay. Aging ex-soccer player Bobby Charlton, 74, born in a northeast pit village to a family of peasant coal miners, is well known for his incomprehensible Geordie accent. Having left his favourite pastime as a footballer at the age of 35, he hasn't done a day's work in his life. Although some would question whether football can be considered work in the first place, he tried football management in 1973 with part-timers Preston North End, who were soon relegated. So poor was his record there, the following season he made himself player-manager, thinking he could sort out their problems on the pitch by reinstating his now ageing legs. The following season he left, realising he couldn't manage a child's Christmas party, never mind a football team. Totally unemployable and desperate, but wanting to continue to exploit football for money, he went begging back to the hugely rich Manchester United, where they took pity on him and made him a director. A director of what, though, is not known, with him having so little to offer the club. although he seems to do well as a director of nothing with his 5-bedroom detached house and top-of-the-range 30-grand Jag. Last year, Charlton was voted the 4th greatest Manchester United player of all time. But that's hardly an achievement when you consider the top 3 were adulterer Ryan Giggs, alcoholic George Best, and karate kick madman Eric Cantona. Charlton has distanced himself from his wayward bloodsport brother Jack, who enjoys killing wild animals on a regular basis and was known for hacking players and occasionally breaking their legs. So vain is Bobby Charlton that when he began to lose his hair in the 1960s, he refused to go bald gracefully, sporting a style of stranded, isolated hairs, which would often flop around when he was running before he would tug them back over his head. This style is today known as the Bobby Charlton comb-over and is undoubtedly Charlton's only lasting contribution to society. Okay, so beware if someone writes a hit piece on you. Okay, another aspect of the media is if you just need to go to any newsagent and look at the spread of papers, you have to say that they're colluded, that they're all taking their orders from somewhere. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. And items like this illustrate this. This was 2 BBC news journalists were talking about Libya, and they were talking about some celebrations in Martyrs Square in Libya, and they were showing pictures of something in India, of all these crowds in India. Now, the point being that the other news channels, such as Channel 4, ITV, they should have leapt on that. They should have had it in their satirical comedy programs. They should have had it on their main news that this mistake was made, because they're supposed to be in competition for them for news. But no, if you'd done that, it would have damaged the overall arching agenda, which is Gaddafi is evil and need to be getting rid of. So they can't have another news channel criticising this, and there are other examples of this which prove that they're colluded. Now, media blindness is another aspect. I'm sorry for putting up obscene images on the screen. I'm going to create a hypothetical scenario just to show you that that the media put the blinkers on and ignore certain stories which don't fit their version of, well, not the truth, but the version that they want you to perceive. Let's just imagine that Nick Clegg wants some bodyguards and he recruits 3 bodyguards. And one day he says to the lead bodyguard, hey, will you murder the chief of the Metropolitan Police for me with the other bodyguards? And he says, no, I'm your bodyguard. Don't want to do that. He says, if you don't do it, we'll sort your family out. We'll murder your family. So he goes and does it. He murders the chief of police. Next week, Clegg says to him, I want you to murder the health minister. So they go and do that. I want you to blow up a police station. I want you to murder someone from the Foreign Office and various other people in the government. And they go and do that. Then the British government finds out about it. So they issue an arrest warrant for Clegg. Clegg hops on a plane and buggers off to Scotland. And the Scottish government say we're not handing Clegg over because this is just a political issue. Right? But here's the question. Should that be on the news if that happened? It's not a difficult one, is it? Of course it should be on the news. And it should be on the news in every country in the world. The lead story. Now, this actually allegedly happened in December 2011 in Iraq. The Vice President, Tariq al-Hashimi, according to his 3 bodyguards who have given lengthy confessions here, this is in the Iraqi Interior Ministry. They showed videos of his 3 bodyguards, and he had been ordering them, according to them, to murder all of these people. Now, this is Tariq al-Hashimi, who was essentially installed as Vice President by the Americans. And it would be my guess that al-Hashimi was getting all of these weapons, things like remotely detonated roadside bombs and that kind of thing. He had them all stored in his house, according to these 3 guys. I would bet that they were American weapons. Because al-Hashimi had meetings with George Bush where they discussed how they could deal with the more extreme elements of the installed Iraqi government. But that's a story that they don't want to know you about. I mean, look at this image here. This is in the Iraqi Interior Ministry. This is the arrest warrant for the Iraqi Vice President. Where's the BBC microphone? Press TV there. There's no CNN. okay, if you dig around on their website, you will find the story, but it certainly wasn't a lead news item. They don't want the reason why they don't want you to know that, because it doesn't fit in with what they want the public to perceive, which is that Iraq, any violence in Iraq is done by insurgents or Al-Qaeda. It's not done by members of the government that the Americans have put in place. He's currently, well, they've actually had a trial without him. He fled to Turkey, this al-Hashimi, and the Iraqi government are demanding him back, and they've actually held a trial without him there, and they've sentenced him to death. And he's now saying, oh, it's a kangaroo court. Now, the actual videos of his bodyguards, they were available on the internet, and I couldn't find any English translation for them. Can you believe that? And I've actually had them translated by a friend of mine who is an Iraqi. This is a 6-minute clip. I won't play it all. I will play this on my TV show at some point. But they go into detail as to what murders al-Hashimi was getting them to carry out.
Wanted to cause maximum damage, and it was a police car. 3 people lost their life through this because explosive was so intense and so big it caused maximum damage. When they left the police station, we blew that up instead. Personally, I was trapped. I'm a captain in the army. I was basically stuck and trapped in that operation. Tariq al-Hashimi has destroyed my life. I wanted to go higher and higher in the army, and basically I got trapped in his undoing. He destroyed my family as well. Basically, I was threatened, you either work with us hand in hand, or we'll finish you and finish your family as well.
Okay, so that's media blindness. Now, I mentioned Murdoch before, and the phone hacking smokescreen. I don't call it a scandal. This guy's more shrewd than you realise. He has not been hauled because of his activities involving phone hacking in front of this committee, in my opinion. In my opinion, he is responsible for himself being there. I think he has orchestrated it, and I will explain why. There's an anomaly with regards how the phone, I won't call it hacking because it's actually listening to people's messages. When you buy a new mobile phone, if you don't set the password on the mailbox, anyone can listen to your phone messages if they know your telephone number by dialing a particular number. And that's what these journalists were doing. They were listening to messages. Now, the story broke on the 5th of July with, and this was reported in not just The Independent, the News of the World had hacked Millie Dowler's parents' phone. It's a big scandal. The following day, the News of the World has hacked the Soham family's parents' phones. 2 little girls who were murdered, another little girl that was murdered, Madeleine McCann, little girl that's missing, stroke, murdered, whatever. 7th of July, they've hacked her phone. This is so scandalous that on the 8th of July, the News of the World announced that they would have to close because of these 3 things, okay? Now, it was announced late on the 7th of July that the News of the World would be replaced by the Sun on Sunday, okay? Now, when you create a new business or newspaper, the first thing that you need to do is secure a domain name. So this article here is in the Telegraph, and it says, how long before the sun on Sunday rises? This was produced late on the 7th, sort of 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock on the 7th of July. They were talking about the fact that the News of the World would have to be replaced. But if you go to the Internet Domain Name Registration body, News International registered the sunonsunday.co.uk and .com on the 5th of July. Now, if they've registered the domain name on the 5th of July, it means they've probably made the decision to purchase that domain on the 4th or earlier than that. So how does this story hang together? This suggests that News International, Murdoch's company, knew that those 3-4 stories were going to be placed. And it smacks of a psyop for me, because these stories of little girls being murdered, that's designed to pull at your heartstrings so that you're not critically analysing what's really going on. I think they needed a reason to get rid of all of the whatever documents were at the News of the World, but I think the other reason why this smokescreen was put in place, if you just look at the date, anyone recognise that date? Yep. The London bombings. This was the anniversary of the London bombings, so the London bombings did not get a look in at that time that this story was breaking, because this was considered more important. And we had just before this year, last year, we'd had Tony Farrell come out, principal police intelligence analyst, saying that London bombings were an inside job. We'd also had Moat, who was locked up for 150 odd days. He had won his trial pertaining to 7/7. So we had two very, very key positive developments of getting the truth out about 7/7, which could have found their way onto mainstream newspapers if we had an honest media. So it's a bit like if you consider a sweet shop and you want to burgle the safe, so you send some kids in to nick some sweets first before you nip through the back and burgle the safe. So the police are chasing after the kids and arresting them for a minor crime, whereas behind the scenes there's a major crime going on. But what is that major crime? What is the major crime of Rupert Murdoch and his phony organisations? Well, these books tell you what the crime is. Murdoch is an accessory to the murder of 56 innocent British people. That's what his crime is. Now compare that crime, the murder of 56 innocent British people, with listen to someone's phone message. Where's the comparison? What is the crime here? So what he's doing, and they massively ramp up this phone thing and make it into they make a mountain out of a molehill to mask the real crime. Right. Just regarding mind control, I'm going to talk about Manchurian candidates. I think most people in this room will know what they are. It's when if someone can be hypnotized and then used to perform some act such as murder or any other act that that person wouldn't otherwise do unless they were under hypnosis. And the notion that people will not do things that they wouldn't otherwise do under hypnosis is you ask Neil Sanders, it's ridiculous. You can get people to do practically anything under hypnosis. It's down to the skill of the hypnotist. And this was demonstrated on the Derren Brown show, the entertainer and hypnotist, who they did an experiment where he hypnotized a young lad to give him a replica gun. They sent him along to a talk being given by Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry's given his talk. There was a trigger word. This was all on mainstream TV, and the lad stood up and he shot Stephen Fry in the chest. Obviously there weren't real bullets. And then the lad was interviewed afterwards and he couldn't remember a thing. So it showed you how simple it is to hypnotically program someone to murder someone. Okay. Now I think that they use other methods as well as hypnosis, such as psychotronics and drugs, etc. But trauma-based mind control, yes. But the point being that it can be done. That's the point I'm making, by someone who has the skill to be able to do it. Now, I've put up various people on the screen here who I think there's a strong possibility that they were Manchurians. And we're running a little bit short of time. I was going to drill down into most of them, but I think what I'll do is I'll just go to the Raoul Moat case. Okay, because I've done a little bit of research into that. Okay, so let's just nip forward to Raoul Moat. Okay. Right, let's just briefly explain the circumstances of this. The guy is a bouncer from Newcastle. He got out of prison, I think, on the 1st of July 2010. On the 3rd of July 2010, he went to a house in a place called Berkeley where he shot his ex-girlfriend and his ex-girlfriend's new lover. He killed the lover. The girlfriend survived. He laid low for about a day, and then he rang the police and said, I'm going to murder a particular police officer in a parked traffic car. And he went, and so it was totally premeditated. He shot him through the window of the car. That was PC David Rathband. Rathband survived. He actually pretended that he was dead after he shot him in the face with this shotgun, and he believes that saved his life, Rathband, because he was convinced that Moat was trying to kill him. Now, when this was sorry, I'll backtrack. After that happened, Moat went on the run for about 6 days and was later shot in a police standoff. The official story is that he shot himself, but I don't actually buy that, but that's by the by. Now, I believe that whole story, that the guy he came out of prison, he found out that his girlfriend was seeing someone else, so he just went bonkers, basically, and I believed all of that. It sounded quite plausible to me. Until the 29th of February this year. This is the police officer that Raoul Moat shot, and he supposedly committed suicide on the 29th of February this year. And I actually don't believe, well, not that I don't believe, I query that. Because as soon as it was released that Rathband had died, this photo appeared in the media, right? That Rathband had been going out with Lisa French. He'd been having an affair with Lisa French. All right, now, as soon as I saw that photograph, I went, whoa, what's going on here? Something not right here. Because I know who Lisa French is. Anyone know who Lisa French is? No. Anyone? 7/7 victim. Lisa French was a victim of 7/7. Now, in 7/7, there were 3 bombs on tube trains, and there was 1 bomb on a bus. On that bus, there was a lot of witnesses, and none of them, not one of them, reliably identified the terrorist, supposed terrorist. He's called Hasib Hussain, 6'4" Asian guy with a massive backpack on him. Not one of them remembered seeing him, okay? Until the government inquest in 2011, where Lisa French gave evidence. Lisa French had been interviewed on TV more than once and never mentioned Hasib Hussain, the terrorist. Okay? I'm going to read an extract from Nick Collestrom's book, Terror on the Tube. So the government inquest into 7/7 started in, I think it was November 2010, and ran through to January 2011. And Lisa French gave testimony at this inquest. I think she was knocked unconscious in the bomb. She had teeth knocked out and she had perforated eardrums, I think. But other than that, she recovered. Now, the inquest heard the bus witness Lisa French seeming to recall the figure of Hasib Hussain on the top deck of the 30 bus, which had exploded in Tavistock Square. I made the decision not to go and sit next to him because I was aware we both had very big bags and that we, would be taking up a lot of room. She recalled him carrying probably a laptop rucksack, quite large, sort of square. So I think that's why I thought it was a laptop bag rather than a camping rucksack. And I also had a laptop. It was a squarish laptop bag like hers, only bigger. And he was carrying it in his hands and then wearing it over his shoulder. That announcement made headlines around the world. But why had we never heard about this before? This is the first instance of the inquest finding a witness who claimed to have seen something like one of the terrorists where he was supposed to be. She suddenly became famous from what looks like a new memory she had acquired. A moving account was given by Lisa French of the bomb blast in Tavistock Square in 2008 or early 2009, 3.5 years after the event. She had been diagnosed as having post-traumatic stress disorder and given cognitive behavioural therapy to try and cope with life. The earlier account, she blacked out at the moment of blast, so doesn't remember anything. But when she came to, people were talking about bomb and bus. She does not mention the terrorist, alleged terrorist. A year after this detailed account, which has no hint of seeing the terrorist, she comes up with detailed memories of going up the stairs behind Hasib Hussain, implying she could recognise him, see him with his laptop bag sitting down, etc. Did the therapist plant the memory in her? She said, I went for quite a number of sessions, over 20 with my psychologist, and he performed some cognitive behavioural therapy with me and also some rapid eye movement therapy too. The CBT therapy involved some discussion around what had happened and how that made me feel, and quite a lot of homework. So she's not spoken about it for 5.5 years, and suddenly the inquest comes and she says, oh, I remember the terrorist. And she's been getting treatment by a psychiatrist who's done CBT therapy with her. So it looks possible that she's been messed with to lie at the inquest. Now, the PC Rathband, the one Raoul Moat shot, so she's the most important witness on that bus, propping up the government's fake narrative, right? And Rathband was dating her. Now, here comes the crux. He was dating her, according to mainstream media, from August 2011. All right, so he'd only actually known her for 6-7 months before he committed suicide, right? And the mainstream media line is that he met her on Twitter. This guy's disfigured, he's blinded. A year later, after he's shot in the face and blinded, he's chatting up women on Twitter and meeting them. Okay, now I find that hard to believe, all right? I've spoken to quite a lot of people in the Northeast who've told me that Rathband, let's just say, liked women. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if I looked to see where Rathband worked, the white line on this map of the Northeast, he was a traffic cop at Eatle Lane Police Station, and that zone there is the region that Eatle Lane covers. So Rathband would carry out would deal with hundreds of traffic incidents in that zone. The red dot on the right is where Lisa French lived then and lives now. So she lived within a few miles of his patch that he worked in as a copper, obviously before he was shot. So I think it's possibly more likely that he has met her before he was shot. Okay, and I've been trying to find out whether that's the case. That's a map of the UK with that little zone. So he worked in that zone, she lived in that zone. Did they really meet on Twitter, or did they meet in person before he was shot? Now, the circumstances of the shooting I find suspicious as well. When I heard that Raoul Moat had shot PC Rathband, I thought, oh, he's probably been flagged down and he's pulled over, so he shot him to try and escape. That wasn't how it happened. Rathband was sitting on an isolated roundabout where he would regularly sit. Now, if you think about it, the police have computer systems where they know where every traffic car is and they know who's in that traffic car. MI5 have access to those systems. So MI5 would know that PC David Rathband would regularly sit in a remote exposed location on his own for 1 or 2 hours at a time. So if they had programmed Raoul Moat, that would be an ideal time to kill Rathband, because he'd be in a known location and they would know he was there. So I'm speaking hypothetically here, I'm hypothesizing, if they'd programmed Moat, what they could have done is triggered him to get there because they knew Rathband was there, and then triggered him to kill him. And then they would know there was no witnesses at the early hours of the morning, and they would know that Rathband would be sitting by himself. Now, it was put in the media that Moat had had psychiatric treatment in prison just before he did these shootings. But it said in the media that he had requested psychiatric treatment. Now, he's a bouncer in Newcastle, right? I know quite a few bouncers in Newcastle, but I don't know one that would request psychiatric treatment, right? I suspect they gave him psychiatric treatment and they said in the media that he had requested it in case that information came out. So it's possible that psychiatric treatment was him being programmed. And of course, they have to provide another motive for the killing, which is why he would have also been programmed to shoot his ex-girlfriend. So these images appeared in the Sun newspaper after the shooting. They would not normally show images as graphic as that of a serving officer. So did PC Rathband meet Lisa French before he was shot and learn something about the fact that she was being messed with? Because remember, he's a police officer and he will know about how you're not supposed to mess with witnesses before government inquests and have lies planted in you. Did he learn something when he was having the affair with her about the government's fake narrative? That would provide a motive. Now, I wanted to find out, because it all rests on when he met her. Because if he did meet her before he was shot and was having an affair with her, that means that every major newspaper has lied about them meeting on Twitter in 2011. So if you can establish that, the truth about when they met, then I think it's possible that Moat was programmed. So I rang Lisa French and asked if she would come on my TV show and talk about 7/7. And I said to her, this is word for word, I was wondering if you would answer a few questions about your experiences on the bus and also with PC David Rathband. She replied, I won't be answering any questions about David. She'll refer to him as David. And then I said, can I ask why that is? She replied, because everything I have said has been misrepresented so far, so I won't be speaking about David. So that tells us that we can't believe anything that has been written in the media about what she has said in their relationship. And of course we can't speak to David because he's dead. And we only found out about Lisa French after he was dead. The media didn't report this affair before then. So I actually wrote to Lisa French as well, and she didn't reply. I was very polite. I didn't mention anything about Manchurian candidates, just the fact that I thought the media had possibly lied. Did she want to speak? But I haven't had a reply. So when did the relationship start? It rests on that. Now, can anyone remember the Paul Gascoigne incident pertaining to this? Anyone? Yeah. Because when the police, I think it was about a 6-hour standoff, he'd barricaded himself under this bridge and the police were sort of holding him at gunpoint. Paul Gascoigne was drunk and he actually got in a taxi and he went to see Raoul Moat, and he actually took some chicken and a fishing rod and some cans of beer. He's going to try and talk to him, right? Right, but now just think of Paul Gascoigne. In the 1990s, Paul Gascoigne was an icon. He was the David Beckham of the 1990s, Gaza. I actually quite like Gaza. But so he's possibly someone who has been messed with himself by psychiatrists. I mean, he's been in enough clinics and rehab. So just listen to this and see what you make of what Paul Gascoigne says. Listen carefully to what he says about what he can remember and his account of it.
I was sitting in the house and I was bored, and then we just started having a few drinks, and he just come on the headlines, Moat, Rothby, 2 police with a gun in his head or something, and I went, oh, I know him.
Did you know him?
No. I remember we used to be on the doors. I remember a couple of times being on the doors in Newcastle, and I just got some chicken, a fishing rod, a couple of cans, and a blanket to keep him warm or something.
Yeah.
And I got in the taxi driver, I was in the taxi, and I said, "Guys, where are you going?" He says, "Okay, just keep on driving." And this is what I've been in the news for a while, you know. And I said, "Rothbury." And the taxi driver started shitting himself. He was like, "Oh, you're not going there?" I said, yeah, just a friend of mine." He went, "Not him, is it?" I went, yeah. Taxi driver, "No, Paul, please." I said, "No, he's a good friend of mine." I remember
we shouldn't be laughing about this, by the way.
But I remember the policeman stopped and I got out with a chicken in one hand, cans and a rod on my back. And he went, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to see my mate Moaty." The police were laughing their heads off, you know, and they went, "How about Paul?" And I went, no, it was so funny. I said, I remember saying, "I know where he is." And I went, "Where?" And I says, "There he is." I says, the helicopter light's on him." And Paul, "That's a star." It was a star, you know, bright star. I thought it was a helicopter light.
Right.
But then I turned around and I thought, I better get home, like, and the taxi driver had done a runner. He shut off. I think he panicked, and I had to get lifted home at photographer. And then it was just the next year. It was the next year, I was like, I had 15, 20 messages, and I thought, oh, what have I done yesterday? And
You didn't remember it all the next day?
Okay. It was like, oh my God, I am in trouble. And but I thought, Sky knew straight away, boom.
So there could be nothing to it, but he couldn't remember what he'd done the previous day. He thought he knew him, and it turns out he didn't. So I find that a bit odd. And another thing I find odd is the 2 accomplices of Raoul Moat, because when Raoul Moat shot Rathband, there was 2 guys waiting in the car for him. This hasn't been widely publicised, and if they were robbing a bank, okay, where they're going to get some gain from using a shotgun, fair enough, you might have 2 accomplices, but 2 independent men, young men, are helping him in this operation right the way through. I find that quite difficult to believe that they would do that for their own volition, just helping him going around shooting people. Okay, and one of them got 40 years. He got 3 concurrent life sentences, and the other one got 20 years for assisting Moat. So I think there's a chance, if mind control is involved in this case, that they've been messed with as well. So in summary, the reasons why I think Moat may have been a programmed killer is that Lisa French was the most important bus bomb victim at the sham inquest, which propped up the government's false narrative. Moat spent time in a government establishment immediately before his killing spree, and he was visited by a psychiatrist. He shot multiple targets, which hides the real motive. The killings were totally premeditated because he rang the police and told them he was going to shoot Rathband. He was eventually killed. This prevents a psychiatrist deprogramming him and finding out what's really gone on. The circumstances seem pre-planned. Rathband was in an isolated location. Rathband meeting French on Twitter seems unlikely to me and is possibly a cover story. French's statement saying that everything I have said has been misrepresented so far, and mainstream media only published details about the affair after Rathband had died, so we can't now ask him about it. So, just to finish this section, the police never, I don't know of any case where the police have considered hypnosis or mind programming as a motive or as being involved in a murder. So I'm speaking rhetorically here. If you want to murder someone and get away with it, go to hypnosis classes, find someone you don't like very much and just program them, because you won't get found guilty, and that's why they use this as a method. And remember that mind control, really, I'm only suspecting these people of mind control because they've committed a really extreme act. Just think of whether mind control is being applied for far less extreme acts, such as manipulating banks, businesses, politicians, etc. You probably would not notice it. It's only because they've committed murder that you scratch your head and think, well, something's not right. So I think mind control could be far more widespread than we think. All right, that ends part one. I've got another talk about the Lincolnshire Triangle UFOs. I'm going to start with some background information on disappearing animals. In April 2000 in Nottinghamshire, there was a sheep abduction of 248 in-lamb ewes. Now, this came to light because the farmer who had the ewes stolen, so that's what it's reported as, had a £10,000 reward in the newspaper. Now, David Caton, who's a UFO researcher, he replied to that advert and he went to see the guy and he went to see the barn that they'd disappeared from. And the circumstances were very Bob Lazar, let's put it that way. There was 248 in-lamb ewes in this barn. They disappeared on the early hours of Sunday the 2nd of April between 1:30 and 6 a.m. 1:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. They were unattended for about 4 hours. But outside that barn, the dog was kennelled just yards from it, and the yard, if I just get my laser pointer here, yeah, the yard would normally have been covered in droppings, okay, and it was clean as a whistle. So the farmer couldn't understand how all his sheep had gone missing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the yard was clean as a whistle, and also there was a very narrow track leading up to the farm, and the vehicle would have had to make several three-point turns in here, and it would have woke the dog that was there and the people in these houses. And the farmer couldn't understand how anyone could have taken them. He also had, on three different nights, 1,268 sheep vanish from a field called Hazel Gapwood Field. And the farmer actually, when David interviewed him, he said it was as though helicopters had come down and winched them up. Okay, now, this is possibly sheep rustling, possibly not. But I'm just giving you some of the reported facts. In September last year, the evening of September the 11th to the 12th, I think it was, there was an abduction of 1,500 sheep, or 1,500 sheep disappeared from a very remote field, all from one field in Lincolnshire. It was reported, as I recall, on the front page of the Sunday Times in a fairly small article, but it reached front page mainstream news headlines. And also the BBC website read, sheep stolen from Stenegot for illegal abattoirs. Police believe almost 1,500 sheep have been stolen in Lincolnshire, may have been taken to unlicensed abattoirs. Now, I'm going to play the interview of the detective speaking about this, but before I do that, I just want to go into some background about Lincolnshire. This is Lincolnshire here, probably not that far from here. Now, the activity that I've had reported to me regarding UFO activity is in the top right-hand corner of Lincolnshire, all right? And I'm just going to summarise some of it. It's this area here which is centred around a town called Louth. We've also got Mablethorpe and a place south of Mablethorpe called Trusthorpe. Both of those places have had many UFOs reported. In fact, Trusthorpe, just south of Mablethorpe, there's a radio transmitter there. Locals nickname it Alien Tower because of the amount of UFOs that have been seen there. But this is the region here that the local newspaper, the Louth Leader, has been reporting UFO cases over the last 4 to 5 years, and I'm going to just list some of them. So 2008, 29th of October, this article reads, after reading the Leader's story, Mr. Goring's extraordinary claims last week, a local UFO investigator has been to the village to scan the skies himself. The man, who asked not to be named, said, I can now report I have been to Brink Hill twice, and on both occasions myself and a friend have seen the objects, and I must say they are as Mr. Goring described. I saw 3 objects with lights on each point of the triangle, with a very large central light. The larger object flew within 100 feet of my car, and we experienced total electrical mayhem, and I felt charged with static. The objects are definitely not the Aurora Black Project plane, because it uses pulsed scramjet engines, but these were silent, and we estimated they covered the distance from the coast to the Wolds in around a second, and that's not possible even for the Aurora. Now, that was in October 2008. About 2 months after that, we had this, we had the area that we're talking about there is Brink Hill here. 2 months after that, we had the Lincolnshire wind turbine incident, which happened just about there. Okay, now this was a very controversial incident where people witnessed UFOs above this wind farm, and then the following morning it turned out that one of the one of the blades had come off and the other one was bent. Now, I've put together some of the TV news reports in this brief clip just to give you a summary of what people saw.
People who live nearby say that it was hit by a UFO. Residents remember being woken in the early hours of Sunday morning by a huge crash. When the sun came up, one of the turbines was bent and broken. That came after several witnesses reported glowing spheres in the sky earlier the same night.
I just suddenly saw this light appear in front of us, and it just seemed to whiz sort of across the sky towards the wind turbines. I said, there was 2 or 3 of us in the car, and I just said to the other 2, what was that?
Several other people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky, and one person even reported seeing an explosion.
Lights appeared first of all, and it wasn't, according to various locals you speak to, it wasn't just one kind of light. There were lots of different lights. There was a small light, says a county councillor. No, says another motorist. It was a massive light with tentacles hanging down, and it was all over these wind turbines, and then look what they woke up to.
I saw a light. I was travelling from North Somercotes to South Somercotes towards Louth. There was a light, a static light, which was over the wind turbines. It was white with a slight reddish surround. And as the car moved, the light seemed to move with us. Whether this was an illusion, I do not know. But as we turned the corner, the light seemed to turn the corner and then disappear.
And then the next thing you find out is that that wind turbine has been damaged.
I've just zoomed right in there so you can see the join where the blade joins the main rotating body. And they look pretty mechanically sound to me. If one of these blades just came off due to mechanical failure, I can't imagine it travelling very far. No more than a few hundred feet. And apparently it took them a while to find the missing blade, so I've heard. But for me, it seems far too much of a coincidence that there were multiple UFO sightings of an object hovering above this wind. Okay. Now, there were various news items in the Louth Leader after this event had occurred. Speculation has continued amongst residents in Conisholm and the surrounding villages, with some saying they saw strange flashing tentacle-shaped lights above the wind farm on the night before it happened. Mr. John Harrison of Salt Fleetby described how on Saturday night, January the 3rd, he looked out of his landing window to see a massive ball of light with tentacles going right down to the ground over Conisholme Wind Farm. Again, scores of witnesses have been coming forward to tell us their weird encounters over the past weeks. And finally, Rebecca Hodgson of Louth was at her horse's stables off London Road January 3rd, the night before the 65-foot blade fell from the turbine at Conisholme. When her horse was spooked by a flashing orange ball in the sky, Rebecca described how her horse stopped suddenly and gazed up at the sky as a bright orange light circled above the turbines. So we've got multiple eyewitnesses. The Daily Mail came out with an article not long after saying that an unmanned stealth bomber could have been the UFO responsible for destroying the wind turbine. Now I personally would just interpret that as disinformation. If the military were flying a secret aircraft in a populated area and it hit something which could have threatened lives, they would not admit to it. So I just think this is trying to muddy the waters personally. But I'm open-minded on it. I'm not saying whether it's terrestrial or extraterrestrial. I'm just presenting the evidence to you because there's more evidence to follow. Then, about 6 months after this, somebody wrote an article in the Louth Leader who had mapped out all of the activity in Lincolnshire, and they claim that it makes the shape of this triangle. So hence, the Lincolnshire Triangle was born. Then on the 2nd of July 2009, we had further UFOs sighted at the location where the turbines were, and again on the 10th of March 2010, more UFOs in the local press above Mablethorpe. Okay. Now I managed to track down the guy who witnessed these flying triangles 2 months before the wind turbine incident, and I've interviewed him. This guy would go out at night, he would go for long walks at night, a little bit of an eccentric character, but he describes what he's witnessed in quite a bit of detail in this next clip.
I've had hundreds of sightings, hundreds, and I used to go out any time from about 5 p.m. till about 7 a.m. in the morning, next morning. And I used to go from one side of the village and back to the other side. So I used to go to the top of Harrington Hill. That was another favourite site of mine. And I used to, I saw these white or orange or yellow balls of light,
Right. Okay.
which turned out to be the black triangle.
Right, see, okay, so can you expand on that? So how did a bright or orange ball of light turn into a black triangle?
Well, I don't know. So,
Explain it then.
they was out in the fields, going round and round the fields, and
Balls of light?
pardon?
Balls of light?
Yes, right. They lit up bright, and then when they come closer, I could see they were the black triangle.
Okay, now were there 3 balls of light that made the corners of the triangle, or?
Sometimes, but sometimes the whole ball was the triangle, and it's like a covering of them.
How many times would you estimate you've seen this black triangle, and what's the size of the black triangle?
Right. I've seen it hundreds of times, hundreds, and I've seen up to 40 in one night. It was right above me.
And what kind of size are we talking about?
I'm saying that approximately 30 foot along each flat side.
Now, there's a military base at Coningsby.
Mm.
Do you think they're flying secret aircraft that could be sighted out of there?
No way, no way.
Why don't you think that?
I've seen them come down to the ground at thousands of miles an hour. They come from up there, straight to the ground, and they loop out, and then they go up again. We've got nothing that can fly like that. Round about 30 foot each flat side, that's right.
Okay, so that's not...
It's not big, is it?
Right.
And the depth of them is not deep either.
Right.
I think there's about a dozen came down, and they come down, and they can turn around like that,
Right. Yeah.
and that is it.
So just shows the underneath there. Top.
That is the front end of it, the flat side.
Okay, so you're saying it flies that way?
Yeah, it flies flat first, that's right. And it floats. It doesn't fly, it floats. Sometimes you can get red, sometimes it's always white. I've got a night viewer.
Okay.
Sees in the dark, and I couldn't see those four without this night viewer.
Tell me about noise, because...
No noise, no noise.
Not even a swish? Or...
Complete silence.
And you've seen these, several of them together, yeah?
I've seen up to 40.
Right.
I've seen up to 40.
So, in the sky at the same time? 40?
Yes, at the same time.
When they leave, describe how that happens. Do they go out to sea? Do they go up? Do they go down? What happens?
Well, they just seem to disappear.
Right.
And
where they are, so they don't go off in a particular direction?
no, not that I've noticed.
It starts off as a yellow ball,
Yes,
and then it develops into a triangle. Explain as best you can how that happens.
Okay. When it comes down to the ground, it's very fast, very fast. And I thought it was going to crash. It come down so fast. It looped out. Next thing I saw, it was over a tree.
Right.
They can stop instantly. Instantly. We've got nothing that can do that.
So this is a ball of light that stops instantly, or the triangle?
No. It was a ball of light when it came down. Over the tree, it was the triangle. It's the first time I've seen it.
Right.
And it was a black triangle.
So you saw a ball of light, it came down, went up, and then you kept looking, and then suddenly it just became a triangle?
That's right. Yeah. Over the tree it was. It stopped instantly like that. When I look through my night vision viewer, they're pulsing.
All right.
You know what I mean? They're
Yeah. But you can't see that through the naked eye?
not the naked eye, no.
Would you, the things that you've seen, are they all of that nature, or do you see different... Like,
No.
For example, I'll give you an example. A guy saw what he said was an egg-shaped craft.
No, I've never seen anything like that, no. Always black triangles.
Right.
And it was tilting from side to side like that. 180 degrees.
Okay.
And I stayed there till 7:40 in the morning.
Right.
And I got my night view on it, and I could see right through it. The light was coming in right out there.
Keep it in the camera.
Yeah.
Show me where the light was coming out from.
Coming right out of the corners.
Right, okay.
3 corners. That's right.
Fascinating.
Mm. And how many people have seen that?
Yeah.
How many people have seen that?
Okay. Right. So this was here in Brink Hill. I went round a few of the villages just asking people various things, and I found another witness, Morag Taylor, who was a taxi driver. She was driving along this road heading north in the early hours of the A16 near the same area, Brink Hill. So just listen to this description. Can you tell me what you have seen in your time as a taxi driver late at night in this region?
There's only the one incident really. I was driving home from Skegness towards Louth one night, about 3 in the morning, and there was a thing hovering in the sky with lights, and the lights were too big to be stars, so I sort of was keeping an eye on it. And then it just shot away at a speed that I thought was much faster than the Harrier jump jet type things.
Right.
And since then it's been explained away to me as being a covert military
Stealth aircraft.
Yeah. And I just accepted that as
You've accepted
as fact.
that. So can I ask, you read that in the newspaper, or where did you get that from, that explanation?
I've got various friends who are quite into aircraft.
Right.
And when I mentioned the incident, they said, oh, that would be whatever it was.
Okay. So
They test quite a lot out of Coningsby.
right. So a test aircraft flown from Coningsby.
It was quite low. It was probably like 3 stories.
Okay. And what sort of size?
Quite big. Probably about the size of a articulated lorry.
Right. What about colour and luminosity?
It was very dark. There was no luminosity, but it was lit at both sides. And it had legs.
Right, it had legs.
It had legs. It was outlined in the sky, and it had legs, and there were
Right.
lights on just above the legs.
I see. And what sort of shape would you describe it as?
Triangular.
All right, so it was a large flying
Big
triangle,
triangle
basically.
with legs.
Right. Okay. And then, but it was stationary.
It was hovering.
Hovering, and then.
Silent. There was no noise.
So there was no noise.
No, and then it just went.
Now, she's been told by a friend that it was a military test aircraft. Now, but if you listen to her testimony, It sounds to me like she's describing the same thing that Eric Goring was describing. It's silent, triangular. She says the size of an articulated lorry. He said 30 feet each side. It's about the same. The fact that it suddenly disappears, it sounds like it's the same thing. Now, maybe they have got completely silent craft that can disappear in a blink of an eye, the military. But why would they be testing them there? I'm not sure. I'm just presenting the evidence. Okay, now, another witness contacted me from Lincolnshire. This time, this sighting was in broad daylight, a very different sighting to the previous two, but it happened quite close by. I interviewed this guy by telephone.
It's Range Road from Alford to Mablethorpe, and it was actually on Saleby Crossroads.
Alford to Mablethorpe Road, okay.
Yes. And I came up to it, and it's pretty blind because there's trees either side.
And were you heading towards Mablethorpe or back?
Yes, I was heading towards Mablethorpe.
Okay, so you're about two miles out of Alford, heading towards Mablethorpe.
So I do that trip every single day.
Yeah.
And I do the school runs twice a day when my wife's not here. And the sunroof was there and everything. It's got a sunroof. I remember that really, really vividly. And I came round the corner, and my little girl was in the back, and she screamed. And the car in front of us stopped, and there was this grey egg-shaped thing, like a king, because I can say, and it was, say the road's 20 feet across, because it's a normal size A road. I would say it was 3 times wider than the road. What came to mind was a huge, I thought it was like a Westland Wessex helicopter. That's what came into my mind, because they're like big bulbous things. It was stopped right above the road, and it was absolutely huge. Like it was bigger than a plane, you know, massive. And it was just moving forward about, I'd say about 1 mile an hour.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it just shot back the opposite direction, the same way it came, but you know,
so which direction did it come from?
The east.
So from the
field.
So from the sea, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it shot back towards the sea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you managed to pin down a date yet?
The date, I have no idea.
But you know, you said it was September, yeah?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was September, because that's the month that I had that black FTO.
Right. Right.
That's the only way I can really pinpoint it.
But you think was it a school day because you'd pick your kids up or not?
It was definitely 100% a school day.
Okay.
It was only 20 feet above the road, and it was bigger than the road and the tree. It was massive. I can't put it into scale. So if it's next to a car, if it was like next to a car, it would be the size of 10 double-decker buses.
Right. Okay. So it was 3 times the width of the road, you said?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, it was like the only thing you could see when you looked up. You couldn't see the sky around it.
Okay.
And that was freaky because the way it shot back, it was instant, and my girl was crying her eyes out. And my boy was, oh my God, what was that? What was that?
And so no noise at all?
Pardon?
No noise at all?
Absolutely no noise. The only thing that was weird, the only thing that was weird, I could taste. It was like, I could taste, that sounds stupid, I sound like an idiot. But I could taste electric. You know, like, when you put an old PP3 battery on your tongue, taste that.
And you said you could smell like a transformer type smell.
So, if he's correct in what he says, that he could smell ozone, which is can be generated when you have electric discharge. We'll go back to the sighting over the wind turbines. The guy said it had tentacles coming down to the ground. That could have been electric discharge, which maybe was not visible during the day, perhaps. Because if something is electrically charged, as it comes nearer to the ground, the nearer it gets, the more likely you'll get a discharge. Okay, now, yeah, there were, after that point in time, so we're talking September 2011 for that sighting of the guy that witnessed the craft that we've just seen, which is the same month that the sheep went missing, but we'll come on to that in a second. But further UFOs, again in the Louth Leader, a couple of months after that. Now let's just plot the activity on the map then that I've gone through. But the wind turbine incident, it's about a 15-mile square. The wind turbine incident, many sightings above Mablethorpe and Trusthorpe, and quite a lot over Louth. This was the egg-shaped object that this guy witnessed in his car. We've got Eric Goring witnessing triangles here and also on this road. So I'm just going to show you where these 1,500 sheep disappeared from on this map. Right there. Single field, 1,500 sheep disappeared. And I'll explain what this structure is a little bit later. So the point to make is the zone where those sheep disappeared from is on the edge of this area which has been dubbed the Lincolnshire Triangle by the local newspaper. So I'm going to play now. This was the detective who turned up the morning after the sheep had disappeared, speaking on local radio.
Obviously, once you walk into a field, you can see that there are quite a few sheep missing, but until you actually do your tally, you're not sure exactly how many have gone, and that's gone up considerably now to 597 ewes and 901 lambs.
And what's the herdsman told you about how somebody could do this? How they could come along? Because you've got to know what you're doing to take 1,500 sheep.
Certainly. I mean, this is an organised group that have come along, ready kitted with the necessary transport. We suspect to be extremely large loaders, cattle wagons, probably the sort that are 3 tiers high. He says to load on 1,500 sheep, if you knew what you were doing and you were going to pen them properly within the lorries, it would take you about an hour per lorry. However, if you were going to do it without any care in the world, as we suspect that these people have done, you could load them without their pens, squash them all in together, and you could do probably a quarter of an hour per lorry. So probably about half an hour in total it's taken to do this.
And of course the question is where they've gone, and I know one line of inquiry is looking at whether they could have gone through an abattoir, and I suppose it would have had to been an unlicensed abattoir if they have done, because everything is very strictly regulated these days, isn't it?
Certainly. It would be very difficult to take any cattle through any marketplace because they're, as you say, extremely regulated, and any marketplace would know, they know their farmers, they come on a regular basis, and they know that they bring so many sheep, and they know how many sheep they've got, or how many cattle they've got. But to take this amount of sheep, you would be noticed straight away at market. So the only other option really is that these sheep have been taken probably for slaughter somewhere. And again, as you say, it's very well regulated. Our country is probably one of the better ones at regulating the slaughter of meat. And these animals have been herded off somewhere and will be certainly not treated as well as they would be if they were done through the proper channels. I would urge any member of the public that gets offered any meat from the back of a van or anywhere else that doesn't seem to be proper and not a proper butcher's, not to purchase those items, because that's probably where they will go onto the market somewhere.
Okay, now the detective was quite economic with the truth in that interview, as will become clear later in the presentation, and he mentions illegal abattoirs. No one's ever found one. Now, the trucks he mentioned, the biggest ones I think they use in Britain, hold around 500 sheep, so you would need at least 3, probably 4 of vehicles such as this one. Okay. Now, about a month after this event happened, 3 people were arrested for rustling these sheep. So when I saw that article, I thought, oh well, maybe the sheep have been stolen, maybe that's the answer, okay? 2 men and a woman have been arrested after the theft of almost 1,500 sheep in Lincolnshire. So I just left it there, I didn't bother looking at it. But over time I became a bit curious. I thought, well, they've never said whether they were charged or whether they were convicted, just arrested. So I decided after several months to go and investigate this. Now this is the church that I interviewed Eric Goring in at Brink Hill, and when I was driving through there I stopped and I asked this guy walking his dog, which is not far from the field, do you know anything about these missing 1,500 sheep? He says, oh yeah, he said the landowner, who was also the animal owner, he says the shepherd's responsible. I said, well, what does the shepherd say? He says, oh, the shepherd says he's definitely not responsible. Okay, so they were both kind of blaming each other. So this is where the location of the field, which is in a very remote location, about a mile from a little village called Donington. And there's an interesting feature a mile south of the field, a mile due south. It's on this corner, and it's a tower run by the RAF. It's not a transmitter tower. It's actually like a climbing frame that the RAF climb up and down. Hang on, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to the tower. This is the village of Donington, which I say is in quite a remote part of Lincolnshire, just a shop, a pub and a post office and a few houses. So I went into the shop And has anyone seen The League of Gentlemen? You've got the picture, right? So I asked the woman, I said to her, you know, I'm investigating these missing sheep. She didn't even speak. She just sort of shook her head and walked slowly backwards like this. So I just walked outside the shop and just started taking loads of pictures of the shop to annoy her. So I went in the pub and I spoke to them. The woman in the pub said, "Oh, I don't think those sheep ever existed," which is a fair enough point. That's possible, okay? Went in the post office, I got a bit more information from that guy. He told me that the person who'd been arrested was actually the shepherd, the shepherd's wife, and the shepherd's father. The shepherd's father is also a shepherd. So they've chosen the people who are closest to the sheep in terms of looking after them, because they've had no other explanation for it. Okay, now as I mentioned, let me see what we've got here. Yeah, this is the field. So the field is an oblong shaped field. It's about 450 yards by 220 yards. This is an electric fence running down one side, so the field is contained in this section here. There's a deep gorge going down the bottom here with a fence running along there. So on one side you've got an electric fence leading to another field, you've got a fence along here and a fence going to another field, and a fence along the bottom going to another field. So there's only one road runs alongside it. This is viewed from the other side, so the field in question comes down here. That's the area there. Okay, now aerial, yeah, that's just a picture of the electric fence. So an aerial view, as I said, you've got a very narrow road coming down here. You've got one gate there, you've got electric fence coming across here leading out into another field. You've got a fence along here. This here is not a gate, it's actually a portion of the fence which can be removed. So they can move animals through that gap there. Again, fields here, this isn't a road, it's just a hedgerow. So there's no access there and there's no access at the bottom of the field. This is actually quite a large hedgerow here and also a large hedgerow there. So the only place where they could have been rustled from is through that gate. Okay, leading out onto the road. Okay, that again, that's another picture of the electric fence. All right, yeah. As I mentioned, a mile south of the field is a structure here, which is a large climbing frame, and it's got the RAF climb up and down it. And a local woman told me that these viewing platforms here, they're actually quite large, hundreds of feet in the air. The RAF camp out on there. For whatever reason, and it's a mile south of the field where the sheep went missing, and it overlooks the entire Lincolnshire Triangle, because it's actually built on the top of a hill as well. So you'll be able to see for miles from those platforms. Next to the platforms are some rather rusty large satellite dishes. I don't know what they're for. Okay, more pictures of the field, and you can just see the tower, the RAF tower there. This is the field where the sheep were, that's the tower. All right, now there's only one house within miles of the field, and that house is on this corner here, about 80 yards from the bottom corner of the field. So if sheep had been rustled through that gate, there's a chance that this couple who lived there would have heard it. They had a dog which barked throughout the whole time that I was interviewing them. So I managed to interview this couple who were interviewed by the police, and this is what they had to say. That's their house there. Okay. This is Patrick and Gabriella, and just standing in front of their house here. And if I just come out of the house, the field starts just on that corner, because there's a fence going across from there. Right. So as you've gone around that corner to the left is where, at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Now, on that particular night when these sheep disappeared, did you hear anything?
No, we didn't hear a thing, did we?
No.
And I can hear the dog barking there now.
Yes.
So.
I'm a fairly heavy sleeper. My wife can be light sleeping, but neither of us heard anything.
Okay.
My dog would have heard something, I would have thought, if they'd been in the proximity of the house.
Now there are rumours that the shepherd and his wife were implicated, and that they were arrested. Perhaps for taking money from the people who turned up with these wagons.
Yes, that's what we'd heard.
That's what you'd heard.
He took a backhander because he was involved.
Now this is rumour, isn't it? You were telling me that you've not heard this, because I haven't seen that in the newspapers.
No.
You said you think you might be inside now.
Well, that's what I'd heard, but you know what people are like. Oh, he's locked up now and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
All I can assume was it was done in the early hours of the morning, in the dark, and how they did it without being seen or heard.
Because that's the other question. They would have had to have sheepdogs, 1,500 sheep, rounding them up to just give the sheepdogs night vision goggles, perhaps.
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether they use any dogs or what.
Well, I would have thought they'd have to get.
Well, I would have thought so.
Unless it was just a gang of men running around the field. But I mean, the sheep were definitely in there about sort of 5 or 6 o'clock the night before, because I remember driving home and seeing
All right,
them
so
there.
you're a witness to them being there at 6 o'clock.
They were there about tea time the night before.
Great.
Yes, and then not the next morning.
So, I mean, you're talking seeing a lot of sheep the night before.
Yes,
because it's a
yeah.
huge amount of sheep, and then
It's a very big field.
So you're a first-hand witness to that following day. There was no sheep in the field.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you were actually visited by Special Branch.
Yeah, Special Branch came to ask us if we'd heard anything, because they reckoned there would have been quite a bit of noise. They reckoned they'd need at least 2 wagons, and the noise of the sheep. I mean, they're not quiet, are they?
No, they make a lot of noise.
And we had to say that we hadn't heard a thing.
I live in Lincolnshire. Special Branch don't come when animals are stolen.
Yes,
Well, tyre tracks.
Well, I'll come on to that. But yes, it's a fairly large crime because apparently it's about £100,000 worth of livestock. So the next part of the investigation, I needed to find and meet the person who was arrested. All I had to go on, because the people in the village wouldn't tell me their names, was that one of them lived in Nettleton. All right, so I drove to Nettleton thinking it was a tiny little village and that it'd be easy to find. It was a big village. So I thought, how am I going to find this guy? All I know is he lives in Nettleton. So I headed for the local intelligence gathering establishment, which pubs are excellent sources of intelligence, believe me. I went in, you're not going to believe this. Yeah. I went in, you won't believe this, there was one guy at the bar, so I bought a pint of lager, I struck up a conversation, and I said, do you know anything about these sheep? And this is God's honest truth. He said, oh, that'll be Arthur, he lives just down there. I thought, there is a God. Okay, so I knocked on his door, the guy came to the door, he's the father of the shepherd who was arrested, and a couple of weeks previous to me knocking on his door, and this was in June this year, he'd been completely cleared by the police. Now, he didn't want to be interviewed, he'd gone through a lot of stress, been under suspicion for this crime for several months, and eventually being cleared because there was no evidence against the guy, he has no previous, and you can judge a person, and I would say definitely this guy was not involved. And I recorded my thoughts immediately after I spoke to him in the car. Right, I've just knocked on the door of the man who was arrested for the sheep rustling, and he's informed me he seemed a very honest, genuine guy. He's got no previous history or anything like that. That 3 weeks ago the police cleared him completely of having anything to do with any sheep rustling, and also the other 2 people who were also arrested have been completely cleared, right? And that has not been put in the media. Apparently the landowner basically gave the police a tip off. He thought that these people were involved, but it turns out that they weren't involved. So there is no explanation as to who has rustled these sheep. Now, this guy is an experienced shepherd. He reckons you would need 5 wagons, each of them 3-tiered. He said you would need 2 or 3 dogs. And the other thing that he said was, if you were going to do something like that, every person along the chain would have to be in on the crime. In other words, the driver, the people rounding up the sheep, the people at the abattoir, any checks that the vehicle would have to go through, etc. The landowner. He said everyone would have to be on it. He said there's no way you could carry this off without basically the police finding out or being exposed. So it's the disappearance of these 1,500 sheep has clearly caused a rift between the landowner and the people who were looking after the sheep, and there's no resolution of this.
So the sheep have not turned up. No one has been found guilty of anything. So the BBC and other mainstream news outlets were quite happy to report, oh, 3 people have been arrested, but they were not happy to report that 3 people were not charged and 3 people have now been completely cleared. And this guy is asking his solicitor if he will ask the police and the media to report that he has been cleared, and he's not sure that they're going to do that. He had clearly had a rough time with this. That was obvious from speaking to him, but he didn't want to be interviewed for obvious reasons, and he stated that the other people who have been implicated also probably would not want to be interviewed. They just want to put this behind them. Really, the UFO explanation is still well and truly possible, in my opinion.
After we found that out, we camped out in a campsite and chose one bang in the middle of the Lincolnshire Triangle. And you can see there we were the only tent this was in the middle of summer. So, didn't say anything though. Okay, so what I did, when I spoke to the guy who'd been arrested, he wouldn't go on camera. I says, look, I'm just trying to report the truth. If you change your mind, there's my number. Give us a ring, I'll come down and interview you, because it would be great to get you on camera, because you're obviously not involved. So what he did was he gave my number to the detective who'd been investigating it and said, there's this really weird guy been to my door. So I'm driving back from Lincolnshire to Newcastle, and the detective rings me up and says, what are you talking to, well, he was called Arthur, I'll not give you his second name. What are you talking to him for? I said, well, I'm interested in the case. And the detective couldn't understand how I'd found him and why I was interviewing him. I said, well, you do know it's Britain's largest ever rustling incident, don't you? He said, I'm well aware of that. And then I said to this detective, I says, oh, because I've got my own theories on it. And get this, he said to me, really? I'd be really interested in your theories. And I thought to myself, what do I say now? I said, did you know that your local newspaper calls the region of Louth the Lincolnshire Triangle? No. Did you know that 1,500 sheep disappeared without a trace from Nottinghamshire 11 years ago? No. Would you like some information on it? Anyway, so I give him my website, and then as I was on the phone to him, he says, oh, I've got your website. And I think he went home that day with a completely different view of reality after he'd been on my website. Anyway, so when I got back, and he did tell me that there was no evidence of any vehicle marks and that the entrances to the fields were undisturbed, okay? But I've got more information on that. Because when I got back, I submitted a Freedom of Information request asking if there had been any photographs taken of that one gate that they would have come through, because it would be the hedgerows would be full of wool, there would have been droppings on there, the ground would have been worn where 1,500 sheep would walk through, there would have been tyre tracks, etc. When I submitted the Freedom of Information request, it came back and they said, oh, look at the BBC website, it's on there. Fat lot of good that is. So they didn't give me that. So I decided to ring him. I rang the detective, and this is what...
Hello, Nick Jones. Hello, Nick. This is Richard Hall. I spoke to you a few weeks ago about the missing sheep case at near Donington.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've been doing a little bit more research, just looking into it, and if I do find it, because I've got a completely open mind on the whole thing, if I did find anything pointing to criminal activity, you have my word that I would report it to you immediately in total confidence. That's just the first thing I wanted to say. But I just wanted to ask if you would be able to give me any information on the actual gate and the lock, because I've had a look at the lock on the gate and it's not a new lock. But do you know if the gate was open or closed when the first person appeared on the sorry?
It was closed.
It was closed. And was there a lock on the gate?
I don't know off the top of my head, mate, to be honest.
You don't know off the top of your head, right?
No.
But the gate was closed. And the other thing about that field is, if you go through it, and as you go along it, it goes down into a very deep gorge.
It does, yeah.
And then there's a kind of a removable portion of the fence at the bottom of that gorge. Do you know if that was intact? Or had that been... Or do you know if there was sheep on the other side of that fence?
There was on the other side of the valley, yeah.
Right, so there were sheep there as well, and they'd all gone, yeah?
No, they were still there.
Oh, they were still there? So, what are you saying? Everything the other side of that fence was still there?
Yeah.
Okay, and had that missing portion of the gate been touched at all, or?
As far as I'm aware, everything that was gated and locked was still intact.
Right. Okay. But the gate was closed, and again, any evidence of any vehicles there?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. But you don't know whether the gate was still padlocked. You just know that it was closed.
Yeah, I seem to remember it was padlocked as well.
It was padlocked as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So everything in that,
as it is today, still in situ, not been touched at all.
Right. Okay. And it's yeah, I was just going to ask you that Mr. Dennis, I've tried to contact him, I haven't been able to get in touch with him. I've seen he's installed cameras in various places because he's obviously trying to find out information about people in the area. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
There's 2 cameras. I mean, I don't know whether you want to know this, whether you're interested. It's, you know where the RAF tower is?
Yes.
There's 2 houses there next to it. Yeah. On that corner there, there's a little CCTV camera. Well, there's 2, and it's kind of pointing. If you were to drive around that corner, it's quite a sharp corner. Yeah, it would capture the driver, and I believe he's installed those.
Right.
So, for my own knowledge, that suggests to me that he's not implicated, kind of thing, because I know that there was a bit of finger pointing going on, but
no, definitely not. We did a good financial investigation on him, and he's no worries and doesn't need to claim on his insurance, that's for sure.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Certainly in the black rather than the red, that's for sure.
Right. Okay. All right then. Well, thanks very much. I mean, I just thought really it was just to ask you about the gate, because I took a little photograph of the padlock, and it's not a new padlock, which suggests that it could be
broken in the first place.
It wasn't broken. Yeah. Okay. Okay, all right then, Nick. But if in my sort of travels, because I've spoken to a few people in the village and that kind of thing, if I do find anything that is the remotest bit suggestive of criminal activity, I will contact you and I'll let you know. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now. Cheers. Bye now. Bye.
Okay. So just to summarise what we now know about this event, there was no suspects. There was no evidence of an insurance job. There was no physical evidence. There's no witnesses. The field was padlocked and all of the entrances were completely undisturbed with no signs of any trucks or rustling. And a huge UFO was witnessed 12 miles away in the same month. So does the evidence point to that or that? Now, one final point. I don't know whether these sheep were taken by a UFO controlled by non-human intelligences. If they were, let's just ask the question, what are they needed for? The only thing that springs to my mind is as a source of protein. But a source of protein for who or what? Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.
Obviously, very many thanks to Richard. I'm sorry, I'm trying to juggle a few things in my head at the moment. Richard, fantastic research, on the ground, doing the research, very few people doing that. And I'd like to thank him for all that sort of work he's been doing again, particularly in regards to this case. So, I mean, what a guy, eh?